Sorry. Can you start again? I forgot to say we're about to start. Oh, hi everyone, we're about to start. This is the first time Aging Fearlessly has gone with video and live to air, so here we go with my outro. This is the song of the day. Well, hello there. I'm Karen Sander. You're listening to Aging Fearlessly, a program for the over.
I don't know if they can hear that.
Uniquely wonderful baby boomers. My aim is to educate, motivate and inspire you to embrace the exciting journey of life for decades to come. So stay tuned to a variety of guests who will share their stories and passions to help us gain insight into the ways to live a happier, healthier life. Welcome listeners, we're back for another week of Aging Fearlessly and thanks a lot for joining us. Do you know, I seem to be linked up with so many amazing men and women who support this station and my program, and there's so much talent on the Northern Beaches, and I was introduced recently by a friend of mine to Catherine DeVrye. And she's sitting here with me today, and she is an author who's written 8 books, and they're translated into a dozen languages, Catherine?
At least, yes.
That's amazing. And you've been twice voted Keynote Speaker of the Year for the Australian Executive Woman, and you carried the Olympic torch.
On the Northern Beaches on the day of the opening ceremonies.
Oh my goodness, that must have been absolutely a wonderful experience.
It was amazing, the way the community all came together.
And look, there's so much about Catherine. I'm in the process of reading her book, and we'll talk about that a little later today. But welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Karen. Great to be here.
It's so amazing to have you here in the studio, because I get to speak to so many amazing people, and you weren't born in Australia. What brought you here to Australia?
Wasn't your normal journey, I suppose, in many ways. Life was going pretty much according to plan. I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Beautiful part of the world.
Beautiful part of the world. A little bit colder than the Northern Beaches.
And colder for longer.
For sure. I went to university in the United States, and then the year I graduated from university, both my parents passed away of cancer. And I was an only child, and my best friend and her husband were on a teaching exchange in Melbourne. I thought, I need a best friend. So I came to Australia with a backpack, $200, and a one-way ticket for a 3-month working holiday, and I've stayed over 30 years. So I never speak on time management.
Oh, well, no, you wouldn't, would you? But look, honestly, what an amazing way to come to Australia. I guess it was rather a difficult time for you.
It was an incredibly difficult time, but the biggest problem of my life turned into the biggest opportunity of my life. And for the first 17 years, before I won the Telstra Executive Woman of the Year Award, which is now the Businesswoman of the Year Award, I never even told close friends that my parents passed away, because I felt really awkward talking about it. There were no coping mechanisms in those days, but since my memoir came out and since I speak at conferences, I now tell total strangers to help them turn their stumbling blocks into stepping stones more quickly and maybe more elegantly than what I did.
Yeah, well, I love that phrase of turning your stumbling blocks into stepping stones, because too many people just do stumble with them. My glasses are fogging up.
Are they?
Yes.
It's a pretty hot day outside the studio.
It's hot in here. I don't think it's menopause. It's just hot.
A power surge, possibly.
A power surge. Oh, I wish that air conditioning would flow a bit faster. So, yeah, stumbling blocks into stepping stones.
Well, I think we all face them, let's be honest. I mean, we live in one of the best countries, one of the best places in the world. But even then, and even people use the term first world problems, but there's still problems that we have to cope with ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that, problems are just part of the natural human condition. And whenever we're faced with a dilemma, and I certainly was faced with a choice of looking backwards and feeling sorry for myself, like, oh, this isn't fair, why did this have to happen to me? And I went through a bit of that.
Yeah.
But nothing I did in the past could change the circumstances of the present.
Yeah.
So I had to change my attitude, and rather than look back, look at what I could do in terms of looking forwards. And I had the good fortune of boarding with an elderly couple in Melbourne called Frank and Betty Jansen.
I read about them in your book.
There you go. Well, Frank was a great Aussie. He was president of the Flemington Bowls Club. And he had this great saying. He said, Kath, shift happens. Now, he often left out the F when he said shift happens.
Oh.
But that's why I wrote a book called Hope Happens, which is the opposite of shift happens. But he also said every day above the ground is a good one. And those 9 little words helped me start looking forward rather than backward.
What a lot of people don't realise is that when you start to look back, that's when you start to become depressed. It's making you sad. Looking at your mistakes or looking at your problems is,
And we all have them.
Yeah.
We all have them. No one gets out unscathed.
Absolutely not. And
but we're all faced with a choice of being a victim from change or a victor from change. And only we can make that choice. We can wallow in self-pity, or we can look at what we can do. And sometimes the options seem limited, but we should never be too proud to ask for help either.
Yeah, and looking forward, as we know, you look too far forward, and that induces a whole lot of anxiety.
Sure.
And, I mean, I've had to learn that the hard way. Definitely.
Most of us do.
Yeah, I've definitely learnt that the hard way, and it causes so many health issues for people. So how did a Canadian come to win the Telstra Australian Executive Woman of the Year?
Well, as I said, I started life in Canada. Well, I initially started life in an orphanage, but then I was adopted, and then it was my adopted parents who passed away. And so I started working initially when I came to Australia as a teacher. I worked as a waitress at the Gold Coast. I worked on a bauxite mine up in Weipa.
That must have been interesting.
That was interesting.
Especially like then it would have been completely male, wasn't it?
There were 3,000 men in town and 6 women. One of the other women thought it was a gold mine, not a bauxite mine, but let's not go there. That's another story.
I just have to say I like the odds, especially these days in the dating circuit when there's not many men around.
So, and then I was on a plane from Weipa back to Melbourne, where I was living at the time, and the plane got stranded in Alice Springs with a flood. Now, you never get floods in Alice Springs.
No.
But there was an ad in the Australian newspaper for a job for the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation in Victoria. And the whole ad said, he will do this, his qualifications will be he, him, his. And I thought, I've got no chance of getting it. But the plane was stranded, so I got letterhead from the airline, and with a handwritten note, I wrote a letter to the Minister of Youth, Sport and Recreation, said, you've got 3 days to hire me because I'm going back to Canada. And I got hired by the Minister of Youth, Sport and Recreation, a football player in Melbourne called the Honourable Brian Dixon, and I worked for the department for 5 years. We started the Life Be In It campaign, and then I worked for a politician as a press secretary, chief of staff for another Victorian politician. And then we lost an election, so I was jobless again, and I had a mentor at the Melbourne Mount Eliza Business School and said, why don't you join IBM? And I said, I don't like computers, I don't like technology. He said, it's great training. I joined IBM. They gave me marvelous opportunities in Australia, Tokyo, Hong Kong. I lived in Japan for a while. And then I came back to Australia, and one thing led to another, and I was nominated and won the Telstra
Honestly, it reads like a textbook perfect situation.
Oh, it wasn't always perfect. I can assure you of that. It wasn't always perfect.
Really? I bet you've got lots of stories.
We've all got stories, but it's the chapters we write for the future that are the most important.
There's one, you don't have to go into this, but you met a very, very famous prince once.
Yes, I did when I was working for the Minister of Youth, Sport and Recreation. I'd only been working for him for 2 weeks. I used to drink a fair bit because I used to be really nervous. I wouldn't say boo to a frog unless I'd had a couple of drinks. And my boss was going to this function with Prince Charles one evening, and his wife couldn't accompany him, so I accompanied him. And I got really nervous, so I downed all these sherries, and I'd never drank sherry in my life. And Prince Charles was saying things like, how long have you been in Australia? And, who knows, you might marry an Australian. And I went, never know your luck, sport. And my boss is going, oh, let's get out of here. And I wasn't really princess material. But then I didn't show up to work the next day because I was hungover. And I mean, all my colleagues at the Department of Sport were male. And we always went out for a drink on a Friday night, and they bet me $5 that I couldn't go a week without a drink. It was double or nothing for a month, and I didn't have a drink for 8 years. I was really worried that I was becoming an alcoholic because when my parents died and when I came to Australia, I was quite shy. And I was probably drowning my sorrows in alcohol, so I didn't have a drink for 8 years. And 'cause I was really worried. That was a real wake-up call. I wasn't really princess material anyway, though.
Well, I admire you not having a drink for 8 years, but I think that is a priceless story about Prince Charles. And it was just gold when I read it. I went, oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Catherine, I've got a song here, Hope Happens. Can you tell me about that song?
Sure. You all know where you were on 9/11. I happened to be the keynote speaker at the World Airline Conference on 9/11 to 1,600 delegates at the Brisbane Convention Centre. You can imagine the mood in the room. I was at Brisbane Airport on my way home, and a friend called to say her mother had passed away of cancer that day. And even though my friend's a very compassionate person, that was a much bigger tragedy to her than thousands of strangers on the other side of the world in New York and Pennsylvania. And I've kept a diary every night since I was 16 of inspirational sayings that got me through really bad times. So I started writing a letter to my friend, and the letter turned into a book called Hope Happens, which is the opposite of Shift Happens. And I'd published about 6 or 7 books with publishers before, but I wanted this book to get out right away, and my agent said, no one will take you seriously if you self-publish a book. But I felt so passionate about this book. So I was ready to go to print with it and self-publish it. I got a photograph from every continent on Earth that I'd visited, all my own photographs. And I was down at the photo shop in Manly that day to get the last photo from the Antarctic in the book, because in those days it wasn't digitized, and I had to go to the photo shop to do it. And there was a lorikeet that needed rescuing under a car, and this young man and I rescued the lorikeet. It turned out this young man was a struggling musician, and I'd written a poem called Hope Happens, and I said to him, I'll pay you if you can put this poem to music, which he did, and thus the song Hope Happens, which is registered with APRA, and we've done all the right things, and it was a guy called Brad McKnight who wrote it, and some of his friends recorded it. It's just my poem set to music with these really nice young musicians.
I'm really looking forward to hearing this, so I'm going to turn it on now, and let's listen. So
I said I wanted it to be sort of an upbeat song, and you could just hear the words, but that people, when they heard it, they felt better as a result of hearing the music. You know how music really impacts our moods.
Yeah.
I said I want this song to be really powerful, that people, like sort of a cross between, I don't know, Whitney Houston, Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, but one of those powerful songs, but without the $1 million budget to go with it.
So, Catherine, the video out there, they don't know that, well, we're playing a song now and you can't hear it, but Catherine and I are just going to have a chat, because I think it's amazing writing a book, excuse me, I have to rub my nose too. Writing a book, it's a pretty amazing experience. I've done it once, but not 8 times.
They're all different. It's like children, apparently. And someone says, which is your favorite book? I'm going,
the one you first gave birth to?
Which is your favorite child, yes. Or maybe the one you last gave birth to, the one you're not having trouble with at the moment. And the distributor is not working. But yes, I actually was expelled from English in high school, believe it or not. And when my memoir came out in Canada, and we did a book tour across Canada, and it was a #1 bestseller, I had friends coming out of the woodwork from high school and university going and said, well, what would Mr. Groves say of it? Because you got expelled. I said, well, I've written the book, he hasn't. So, it was a very interesting journey, because Hope Happens I wrote and produced in less than 3 months, which everyone said was impossible. But the memoir took 17 years. And it was rejected by 3 or 4 major publishers. And then Random House, the biggest publisher in the world, accepted it. And I thought, look, I'm a kid from the wrong side of the tracks in Canada.
Yeah.
If I was the biggest publisher in the world writing my story, but it was hopefully a story that other people can resonate with.
Yeah, because it's an interesting story. And look, I wrote my actual book in 3 months as well. It was a 30-day challenge to write 30,000 words. So if you didn't write 1,000 in a day, you had to write 2,000 the next day. But it took me, from that March that I started till I actually launched the book was the following March. So
And
it
takes
takes 12 months, and sometimes it just did my head in. You know, like you're going, but why do I need a barcode for this? And why do I need to register it there? And the questions and the demands that people are putting on you to get this done is quite, you know.
I find writing is not always easy, but I find it's a lot easier than publishing. And I've only self-published the one book, which was Hope Happens. I then went to the Frankfurt Book Fair and the New York Book Fair, and I sold the rights to Simon & Schuster, and they sold it to Hallmark.
Yep.
And then Hallmark went quite large in the United States until Hallmark closed their book division a few years ago. But writing is not as easy. Everyone's, I got a great idea for a book.
Yeah.
Yes, but the great idea takes a long time to distill and end up on the page in a format that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know,
and having good editors.
Editors are gold. They are, you know, they make it come together in the most perfect way. But when I wrote, I remember getting up at 2 a.m. and saying, oh yeah, I can write that chapter now, because I wrote completely out of order like you do a movie. I go, yep, that chapter's right now, that's in my head. And I would sit there, and I'm a very fast typist, and, you know, right, and go to bed now. You know, but it was like I had to clear my mind of what was floating around at that particular moment. And you know what I was told? Don't read what you wrote until you're finished. So that was just a tip for me.
I think everybody has a different style and a different way of approaching it.
I believe that song's finished, and we are just going to go to my little message to the audience, the listeners out there. So I am talking with Catherine DeVrye, and we're back on air now because we're doing a video as well today. So tell us a bit more about your journey from childhood Canada, what you've been going through in life. It's a massive journey.
Well, as I said, I don't know what else to say, really, but, you know, started life in an orphanage. Girls should be seen and not heard in the generation I grew up.
Oh, yes.
Teacher and a nurse were the highest socioeconomic roles a girl could aspire to in my generation. I really admire nurses.
Similar to me, yep.
But I don't do bodily fluids, so it narrowed it down to a teacher. So I started working part-time when I was 13 because I knew it would cost money to go to university. And then I got a scholarship and I got a student loan and all of those things. And I played basketball and volleyball. I was always fairly sporty. In between, I never had time to get into trouble. I was always so busy doing things.
And you're still very sporty, yeah?
I try to be very sporty, yes. I enjoy sport. I enjoy activity. I think nature really nurtures us, and that's what my next book is about as well, Lessons from Nature about resilience.
I do know something about you. Did you go swimming with whales recently?
Yes, a whole group from the Bold and Beautiful down at Manly, and I think you're in that group.
Yeah, I am in that group.
Went swimming in last October and swam with whales in Tonga.
Oh,
and I was the worst swimmer in the group. I'm actually shark bait in the water. Everybody else is so much faster than I am, but I just qualified 18 months ago as a surf lifesaver at Manly. So I'm now a volunteer surf lifesaver. I'm really good on the whistle. If it's anything, a major rescue, I'll send out one of the fit young boys on the board.
But whistle, they're coming.
And then 18 months ago, I swam from Asia to Europe. I did the Dardanelles. And as I said, I'm really slow at what I do, but I just kind of like the ever-ready battery. I just keep on going.
Yeah, well,
I'm pretty determined.
This last year, I just swam the Greek islands, island to
lovely.
island. So, but I was, do you know when someone turns green? I went green when I heard about the swimming with whales, and I walked around.
Green with envy.
Oh,
you should do it.
I will. It won't be this year, but I will do it.
I think I've got a video that I'm not sure if I've got a video on my website as yet about it. I know I've got a video swimming with whale sharks. I've got a whole video on my website called The Wisdom of Whale Sharks.
Oh.
And that was amazing. That was at Ningaloo Reef.
So the corporate world of IBM to a professional speaker.
Yes.
How did you do that?
Well, IBM gave me wonderful opportunities initially in sales and marketing. Then I was their HR manager for Asia Pacific, based up in Japan and then in Hong Kong. And up in Japan, all my staff were male and older than me, so that was a real challenge. And I didn't speak a word of the language, but they're a fabulous team, and I just had a reunion with them last year. And then I came back to Australia. I was totally committed to the concept of service and quality. In fact, my first book was on doing business with Japan, which we're hoping to relaunch for the Olympics and the World Cup in Japan, which are coming up in 2019 and 2020. And I came home to Australia, and I was totally committed to the concept of service and quality, which the Japanese were real leaders in the whole theory of Kaizen. And I was running IBM's leadership development programs in Australia and signing off the checks on the speakers, motivational speakers, and consultants we had, all from the United States at that point in time. And I thought, I think I can do this as well, because I'd lived and breathed quality service. So we'd already committed, and I wanted to save the company money. It was like the Australian dollar was 50 cents to the US dollar at that stage. So I said, I can save the company money, if I did some of the speaking myself. And they said, oh no, we need an expert. So I've got, similar qualifications. Anyway, to cut a long story short, IBM had sent me off to Harvard University to do a short management course. And I said, a friend of mine is out from Harvard on sabbatical, Professor Barbara Nixon. We can get her very cheaply. But there was no Professor Nixon. I dressed up in the blonde curly wig.
Oh my goodness.
And glasses. And
You're
I
such
put
a
on
character.
an American accent, and I pretended to be Professor Nixon. And
you pulled it off.
Who would believe an American called Nixon 20 years ago, really? And the man at IBM who'd hired me 8 years earlier was in the front row and didn't recognize me. And they laughed and they clapped. At the end, I took off the wig, I took off the glasses, and I said, it's just me. Why do we put people in boxes? And my boss said, that was risky, it could have failed. I said, it didn't, so chill out. And then IBM started charging me out to their clients, mainly the big banks, on a fee-for-service basis. I thought, if they'll pay IBM, maybe they'll pay me. And I was going through a divorce at the time, and IBM wanted to send me to New York, and I just didn't want to go to New York, having been in Japan for a couple of years. So I wanted to be home, so I just took a risk and went out. I thought, I'll try it for a year. By that stage, I'd won the Telstra Award. My book on customer service had come out. It was a #1 best-selling book in Dymocks. And I thought, I'll try it on my own. But I was quite security conscious. I mean, I'd been a teacher. I'd worked for IBM. I'd worked for the government. So I thought, I'll try it on my own for a year as a so-called motivational speaker. If it doesn't work, well, I was being headhunted all the time. I was on the New South Wales Police Board during the Royal Commission
I read that too.
into corruption. So I knew my stakes were pretty high as a woman getting a senior role back in business. So I thought I'd try it for a year, and 22 years later, I still don't have a real job. I'm just writing and speaking all over the world now. I've spoken in over 30 countries. I've visited 116 countries, all courtesy of my amazing clients. I've just come back from Korea, where Rolls-Royce flew me over there to speak on quality and service. And I'm going, what can little old me tell Rolls-Royce about
quality and service? I mean,
but the irony is, Karen, I find it's the companies that are really terrific companies. They just want one or two tips to get that little bit better. The companies who really need help on service or quality or managing change, they think they know it all.
It's honestly, I'm just going to say, keep reinventing yourself over and over again, and that inspires me, because I've gone from trained stewardess to teacher to whatever else, but you really reinvent yourself big time, and it's
not intentionally. I just see a need where I can help people, and I initially just spoke on customer service, and then my clients, mainly one of my largest one was American Express. They said, we're undergoing some change, some transformation. Mm-hmm. Can you speak about change? And then I wrote a book on change, and which Thread and Hillary endorsed, which I was really chuffed because he was my childhood hero.
Oh.
And in fact, the royalties from that book go back to the Himalayan Trust, to help with the schools and hospitals he built in Nepal, because he wasn't the first man on Everest, he built 26 schools and hospitals in Nepal, which many people don't know about. And I think life is about making a living and making our life worth living, as our living is being made, and giving back as well. And then when my memoir came out, it took me into more of the inspirational, motivational market, and same with Hope Happens. And I just want to help people, and I think books and speaking can help people learn from my mistakes.
I think speaking too really resonates, because people can see you and just see who you are and really bond with you. I have to lean forward because I have to read I actually have to put my glasses on because I have to read, is it Hero, the song you chose?
That was what,
Hero
yes.
Lies. Oh, Hero, like Mariah Carey.
Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
I think it's just such a powerful song, A Hero Lies in You, because I don't think heroes are the people on sporting fields. I think the heroes are people that are maybe fighting bushfires or rescuing people's lives in Syria, places like that. But I believe within each of us, we have to look for the hero inside. And I often, when I'm feeling down in the dumps, I have actually compiled my own CD of inspirational songs, of my favorite songs, so I put that on. And A Hero Lies in You is just such a powerful song, because a hero lies in every single one of us.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't choose to find that hero.
No. Sometimes that hero hides. You have to go looking for him.
Yeah, well, we're going to a song now, which you're not going to hear, but here we go.
And I won't sing because then everybody would turn off.
So I've turned our mics off so
Okay.
the listeners on the radio can't hear us. And I have the itchiest nose, and you know why? Because I'm on video.
Oh, really?
I just want to
Just an itchy nose. My mum used to say an itchy nose means you're going to kiss a fool.
Oh, I've kissed plenty of them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I'm sorry that I've got an itchy nose, but I have. I keep it real here. So
Facebook.
Oh.
A nose is part of a face.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
I'm sort of a social media novice. I guess I've got my L plates on when it comes to social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and now Instagram, because some of my books are picture books, but I'm still definitely a social media novice.
So I went to a social media function yesterday called LinkedIn Social.
Okay.
Well, it was fantastic. I met heaps of really great people that are doing some really great things, and it's become a bit of my social life now, because I don't seem just getting out and meeting people like that, because
so you spend time connecting with people online?
Yeah, I just go and meet people at functions like that, and then try and pick them up to connect with. But I don't always keep in touch with them, but I find what other people do incredibly inspiring for myself. And learning, like I'm learning from you. I learn from people every day.
I think we're all learning, and I wished I had it with me, because I didn't know we were doing this to video, but I've got when I was down in the Antarctic, I've got this great photo of a penguin underneath a tripod. This was in the days before smartphones, and I've created a postcard out of it, and it says, "Don't just worry about your selfie, believe in yourself."
Yeah.
And I think that that's really key. I think social media is an amazing medium if it's used properly, but I think it can also be a distraction, especially for many young people as well. And then, cyberbullying, all of those things. I think selfies and social media and all of that's great, but how many friends on Facebook, all of that stuff's great, but I think it's more important to connect with people in real life.
Yeah, I find, and in the mornings when I go off swimming, I don't even take my phone. It stays there. People say, I'll send you this by phone. I go, don't worry, it's not with me.
Yeah.
And it's my time of day that this is the world and I'm in it.
I know.
I'm being here, present in the world. And, and I think that's so important.
I know there's a new phone out now, and they said it's waterproof. I can take it swimming with me. I'm going, no.
No, because
absolutely not. And in fact, my next book is about lessons from nature, about resilience. And the more we're connected with, our blackberries and our, apples, we used to think they were fruits when I was a kid, but the more we're connected with all these things, the more we need time away from it just to be connected in nature. And I think that's very important, and with people.
I agree 100%. And, I remember I was up in Singapore recently and I saw this girl, young girl, Japanese girl, I think, and oh my God, the selfie she was taking of her. And this is in a cafe, her and a girlfriend, and I was meeting a friend I hadn't seen for quite a while, and we were all just laughing because it was so self-obsessed.
I know. I mean, it's real, like I love photographs. I mean,
so do I.
I absolutely love photography. I've got 2 books of photography published, but it's about photographs that are inspiring, not photos of me and my, and looking this and that and the next thing. And I think that there's a time and place for everything. I was at a concert, just as you mentioned, you're in Singapore. I was at a concert at this amazing cathedral in France, and they said at one point in time, we're going to stop for 1 minute so you can take photos, but there's no photos during the performance, which is fair enough.
Yep.
So we're taking photos of this the orchestra, the amazing, medieval cathedral, and again, there was a young woman in front of me. She just took selfies.
I know.
And I'm going, I just don't get it.
It's really scary. But we're going to go back on air now.
Back on air.
And we've just had
Bye
a little
for now,
promo.
and hi for now.
Yeah,
I'm
bye.
not sure
We're
the
back
case.
on air. So I'm with Catherine DeVrye today. And Catherine is so inspiring. And we're hearing about all the things that she has done in her life, and there's one thing after another, and it's really inspiring because I love, Catherine, people that get up and are doers, and that they really purpose their life to doing good things for others, but to making life interesting and to sharing. You share all your speaking and your thoughts and your books with others. It's a great thing.
I'm very, very fortunate to be able to do it. I mean, I work very hard. Everybody says, oh, you're so lucky you get to travel all over the world. And you get paid a lot of money just for a 1 hour talk, or sometimes it's a half day. But it's not the 1 hour talk. It's all the preparation that goes up, the intellectual property, the writing the books to give me the credibility in the first place. And I keep saying, my boss is a bitch. And if it's like, you work for yourself, I'm going, yep. I work probably harder than, I'm very disciplined. I'm not the most talented writer. I'm probably not the most talented
That's why
speaker.
Editors are important. Yeah.
Yes, but I'm very disciplined because Bryce Courtney, who endorsed my memoir.
Yeah, he did. I've got the book.
He was,
endorsement.
And Bryce was the #1 best-selling Australian author. He said, "Story of hope and inspiration. When's the movie?"
Yeah.
And I'd love it to be made into a movie. And in fact, I know that Lion was produced by people on the Northern Beaches. So I'm hoping they might be listening to this because my memoir, not the corporate side, but the bit we haven't talked about with the memoir was when I discovered my birth family many years later after I was working for IBM in Japan, and 17 years after my parents died, I discovered my birth family. And I went from being an only child with no family whatsoever to one of 96 grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
So I haven't got to that in the book.
Haven't got to that in the book yet.
Oh, no.
So I know what they do, those cold winter nights in Canada.
Oh, so, I'm not even going to ask.
And then I've always loved horses and adventure, but my parents were European and never encouraged me in my love of sport and adventure. But when I first spoke with my birth father, I discovered where I may have got that, because the conversation was the night of the closing ceremonies of the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics. And Calgary was my hometown in Canada.
Yeah.
And ever since I was a little girl, I had a dream of being an Olympic athlete. And even though I went to university on a basketball scholarship and I represented Canada in volleyball, I never went to the Olympics because it wasn't an Olympic sport for women in those days. But during the first conversation with my birth father, I realized where I may have got that love of sport and adventure, because the conversation went something like, he said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I work for IBM."
And so this was on the phone?
On the phone. It was the night of the closing ceremonies of the Calgary Olympics. And I said, "What do you do?" And he says, "I'm a rodeo cowboy." And he wasn't just any old rodeo cowboy. He was 8 times Canadian champion and had been looking for me since I was 6 months old.
So tell us
Which
the whole
explains
story.
where I got my love of sport. Like it was in my jeans. My blue jeans. Oh, sorry, bad joke. No, best I could do.
Yeah, no, I love it. So really, he had looked for you since you were 6 months old.
But it wasn't that easy in those days because there were privacy laws. There was no internet.
Yep.
In fact, how I came to discover my birth family, I was in hospital in Japan, very sick. And the nurses went next of kin. I went, I'm supposed to be this big, tough corporate IBM executive. But I still miss my mom when I'm sick. I miss her hot lemon and honey and Vicks on the chest. And then they went next of kin, hereditary diseases. I went, I don't know. And that's when I decided I wanted to find my birth family only for genetic reasons. I didn't want any emotional connection. I didn't want any financial connection. I just wanted to find for medical reasons. And as it turned out, I ended up meeting them all and back in Canada, and it's been another amazing journey, which is like coming these 2 different worlds. He is a cowboy, me from the corporate world of IBM, him in Canada, me in Australia, and just, it was pretty emotional.
Are
and
they
I
still
also,
alive?
My father just recently passed away. He was still 81 and breaking horses.
My goodness.
When a combine fell on him, when the hydraulics broke, and my birth mother lived until she was in her 80s as well. Whereas I was sure, because both my adoptive parents died of cancer, and I've had my own cancer story of survival. They both died when they were quite young, so I was sure I was going to die young. So by meeting my birth family, I realized that they've lived reasonably long lives. So that gave me hope.
And you weren't young when you found out you were adopted?
No, I wasn't.
The story behind finding out, was that difficult?
Well, it was difficult because my dad died first and then my mom died, within a year. And to get her death certificate, I had to get her birth certificate, which was kept in a bank safety deposit box. I don't even know if they have them anymore in the old days, where you have to get a key and you go down to the bank and they let you into this big room, this big vault. So anyway, when I was finding her birth certificate, that's when I came across my adoption papers. But there were so many other emotions going on in my life. That was the least of my worries. So I just parked that to one side. And 17 years later, I decided, I just try and find who these people are.
And were they together?
No, not at all.
No.
My birthday is the end of September, so go back 9 months. We're talking New Year's Eve.
Oh.
And I'm not a party girl.
Yep. Okay. So, yeah, interesting story of adoption.
It looks stranger than fiction. It really is. And I was very careful, right? It took me 17 years, as I mentioned, to write the story because I had to be very careful about what I said and what I didn't, because it's my story of my journey. Some of them have slightly different recollections of some of the things that happened.
Yeah. So
but my birth mother left me in a motel room in Montana. And I had an elder half-sister from a different father. And I'm very grateful to my birth mother because I don't know, it would have been very difficult for a woman in that era. There was no support. There was no support for single mothers. And there's a huge stigma in a small country town where I grew up of having an illegitimate child. And I don't believe there's any such thing as an illegitimate person. I believe we're all legitimate, regardless of our circumstances of birth, our sexual preferences, our religion. We're all legitimate. But it wouldn't have been easy being a single mother in those days.
So even in the school days when, in my school days, I was born in 56. So even back then, teenagers fell pregnant and they disappeared. 7 or 8 months.
Yes.
Just gone, come back, children adopted by new parents. And that was never talked about. No. And there's, they're starting now to talk about those things that happen. And
they should too. And then my birth mother, just like we have the stolen generation issue here, this similar thing with the Indigenous people in Canada, then my birth mother claimed that I was stolen from her by the social workers. So I've got a great deal of empathy for all people involved in any sort of adoption, in terms of ultimately anything has to be about the rights of the children, not the rights of the parents.
Yeah.
And the best possible future for the children. And I am so grateful that I was adopted. And I'm so grateful to my birth mother that she left me in a motel room.
And then you meet amazing people like Frank from Melbourne as well. So you've got families everywhere.
Family of friends.
Yeah, I do want to play another song, which is, I'm far away today from this. It's a grand march. Tell me about it.
Well, you asked me about to give 4 songs, and I've got very eclectic taste in music.
Yeah.
Growing up in Calgary, Alberta, I can't help but like country and western music, like John Denver, Gordon Lightfoot, Ian Tyson. So, but I also, my parents being European, I was forced to listen to the New York Metropolitan Opera on the radio every Saturday afternoon, which I resented like crazy because I would have rather been out playing sport.
And this is your birth mother?
No, these are my adoptive parents.
Oh, your adoptive parents. That's who I meant.
They're my real parents are my adoptive parents.
That's what I meant.
And I'm really, they're my real parents. So they were European, so I had to sit and listen to classical music, and I hated it, except for the Triumphant March from Aida, which I think is just, it's music that if you hear it, and I've subsequently been to see a couple of productions, it can bring tears to my eyes. It's just such powerful music.
Well, I hope I got the one right because there was a few to choose from. So we'll just see how we go here. Yep.
That's the one.
So you can't hear the music right now.
But download it on iTunes. Aida is the most powerful music. It's a march. I mean, I know the opera now as well, but it's just powerful music. And I guess Opera, I'm not a huge opera fan, but that's the one opera score that is just embedded in my brain. Opera, country and western, classical music. I like a wide range of music.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of people here that do country and western programs and are quite well-known country and western musicians in Australia,
Okay.
and ex-principals of schools, and like carrying on, have big shows every week at Pittwater, every month at Pittwater
Okay.
RSL, and really incredible.
I love that joke about country and western music. If you play the CD backwards, you get back your horse, your car, your woman.
Ah,
So it's a very old joke, country and
Yeah,
western joke. Because everybody's, you lose your horse, you lose your woman, you lose, it's all, and
and Calgary's the real town of
Rodeo.
rodeo.
Calgary Stampede.
Yeah,
Rodeo,
so
yes.
I did go to Calgary in
Okay.
around 79.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was skiing around there,
Oh,
and
skiing is great.
but I had friends that lived in actual Calgary, but I
Mhm.
was up in the mountains. So, yeah, so
Yeah,
I've
I
heard
love the
quite a
mountains
lot
and
about
skiing.
a lot about Calgary. It was I love Canada actually.
Well, Canada and Australia are very similar. They're large countries with small populations, extremes of temperature,
Yeah.
and vast distances in between. Both
Yep.
members of the Commonwealth, both with British heritage, plus countries of migrants as well. There's a very sometimes I pinch myself. People I often meet. I'm now an Australia Day ambassador, so on Australia Day every year, the government sends me off to some country place. People say, "Where are you from?" I go, "Manly." They go, "No, where are you
Where
really
are you
from?"
really from?
I'm really from Manly, but I've still got
Yeah,
the Canadian
yeah.
accent because I sometimes pinch myself. Like we could be
Yeah.
anywhere.
Do you get back to Canada very often?
Not that often. I've been back. The book was launched there 6 or 7 years ago. I think you lose track of time. And my new book will be coming out there in September, so I'll go back. But no, not really. Canada's my past. Australia's my present and my
Yeah.
future.
Have you ever done any speaking business ventures?
Yes, I
there?
have. I've done a little bit in Canada and a little bit in the States, but mostly I speak in Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia. I've been doing a lot in the Middle East recently, which
Oh.
seems strange as a woman in the Middle East, but I've been invited by the royal family to speak, and it's been amazing. Obviously, I wear the proper dress. I don't dress quite the same as I do here, and I've had nothing but kindness from men and women in the Middle East. And some of my friends say, "Well, I hope you tell them about what they should be doing about rights for women." I said, "No.
That's not my job.
The fact that I'm there and I've been invited as their guest, the fact that they're listening to a woman, that's enough for me." And it's just a more subtle and quiet message. And I absolutely adore Oman. It's one of my favorite countries in
Mhm.
the world. And Jordan is fabulous as well. The last time you mentioned skiing, the last time I was skiing was in Lebanon after a conference in Bahrain.
It's hard to imagine that there's skiing in
Mm,
Lebanon
there is.
because there's extremes,
There
isn't
are
there?
extremes, yes.
I want to go, when you're in the Middle East speaking, what sort of, are they businesses you're
Yes,
speaking
they're
for?
business people, and it might be banks, it might be property developers, it might be public seminars for people from different organizations, it might be the government.
Can I go back
cross-section.
to, I also want to go back to a speaker role, because I spoke at a function in an hour function, and I had an hour on a meeting in the green in the Hunter Valley
Mhm.
in November. I must have put 100 hours into that. People don't understand
No.
that you just don't get up, stand up. It's not that easy.
No.
Stand up and put a workshop together just out of your head. And
It's a lot. Mark Twain once said, "A good impromptu speech takes at least 3 weeks." And I think that's very true. And, I customize everything. I don't just roll out the same presentation. And obviously, audiences, the humor in the Middle East and Asia is quite different to Australian or
yeah.
American humor. And you've got to be much more circumspect with it. And I put in a lot of work to make it look effortless.
And I understand that.
Mm.
It's even, how do I open this? How do I open this that's going to get their attention? People don't, you think, oh, wow, I'm listening to that person on stage. What did they do to make...
But you have to have a reason. You don't want to speak for the sake of hearing your own voice.
No.
Whenever I speak, I get nervous every time. People say, "You've been doing it for 20 years. How can you be nervous?" I said, the day I stop getting nervous is the day I'll quit, because it means I'm taking my audience for granted. And it's about me. It's not about them. And it's always about the audience. And I really want to put myself in their shoes. And every night before I never have my phone on the night or the morning of a speech. I turn my phone off and I go to bed at night, whether I'm speaking to bankers or whether I'm speaking to a group of hairdressers or plumbers. I go to bed that night. You know that song from If I Were a Rich Man?
Yes.
If I were a plumber, what would I be thinking? If I were a banker, what would I be thinking? I try and just go into that zone, what I can think of that's going to help them.
Yeah, very, and that's a passion.
And I think also I feel I'm a bit of a tradie, like I'm a plumber. I've got a toolkit of information. And I pull out my stories are my tools. I use different tools for different audiences.
Yep. I keep looking down at my timer here because we're about to go back to air, and it's fascinating to talk.
I'm sure that song is well and truly over.
Well, we are back on air now, and I'm speaking with Catherine DeVrye, and we've been covering off on all sorts of topics, but can you tell us about how hope happened?
Well, how hope happened was, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure what we've said that's gone to Facebook or what's happened when we've been talking during the music's been playing, but I was the keynote speaker at the World Airline Conference on 9/11, 1,600 delegates from around the world, and you can imagine the mood in Brisbane Airport, and my phone went off. It was a friend to say her mom had passed away of cancer. And to her, that was a much bigger tragedy than thousands of strangers on the other side of the world. So I've kept a diary every night since I was 16 of inspirational sayings that got me through tough times. So I wrote a letter to my friend that turned into the book, and then had a song commissioned and a poem. And that was in 2001. And just last year in Mongolia, I was on a horse riding trip chasing some eagles, as you do. And I came across a tattoo parlor, which was pretty clean. So I actually have a tattoo on my foot called Hope Happens.
You didn't do that in Mongolia?
I did do it in Mongolia. It's super clean. I got referrals. And one of my best friends said...
I'm not going to ask you to stick your leg
No, I won't stick my leg up in the air. Trust me, I'll show you later. It's very discreet. You can never see it when I'm on stage in my high heels. And you talk about aging fearlessly in your program. My best friend said, I can't believe you've done that. She said, you'll regret it when you're older. I'm going, how much older do I need to be? Like, I've thought about this a long time.
Yeah.
Since 2001, I've thought about it.
And look, it means so much to you.
And Hope Happens, actually, it's the littlest book I've ever written. But it's probably one that means the most to me because I was going through a really tough time. I was building a home about 6 or 7 years ago, and there was all sorts of dramas with the home and the global financial crisis, etc. And someone dropped by on my Facebook page, and she said, hi, you don't know me. So let's just backtrack a little. When Hope Happens came out, I went to the United States to sell it to Simon & Schuster, and I also gave copies to Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York. I gave it to the fireys, the police, the Salvation Army, people in New York that had helped. And, I just really totally believed that this book could help people. Now, that might have sounded a bit grandiose. Anyway, I've subsequently got letters from prime ministers and presidents and governor generals about Hope Happens, but none has meant more to me than one from somebody called Sally in Seattle, who about a few years ago said, I'm just dropping by your Facebook page. You don't know me. I was homeless. The government was taking my kids away from me. I was in a drugstore, chemist in U.S. terminology, and the drugstore is going out of business, and there was a little book for sale there for 99 cents. I only had $1 left that day. I bought it. I read it every day. I made my kids read it. I got a job. I got my kids back, and I thank you and God every day for Hope Happens. So I've got all these these letters from famous people, but that's the only one I've got printed out, and it's above my computer. So I'm having a bad day at work. If I've had another book that's been rejected by a publisher, or my computer's crashed, and I think, why am I bothering writing? This is crazy. Ugh.
Yeah.
I look at that printout from Sally, and my next book is actually dedicated to her, and I'm going to go and try and find her.
Oh, that's awesome. Gosh, I'm just watching the time because we don't have a huge if you got one of the songs that you chose, is there another one that you particularly like? Because we haven't got a huge amount of time left to talk, and I'm sort of looking here
I think I mentioned
going,
a John Denver one.
Is that When You Wish Upon a Star?
Oh, wait, well, that's not John Denver, but that's Linda Ronstadt. And that
Which one would you prefer? There's Let It Be Me, or
no, probably When I Wish Upon a Star. When I was a kid, we used to watch. We didn't own television. We were very poor, but we used to go to the neighbors and watch Disneyland, and that was the intro to Disneyland. When I Wish Upon a Star. Makes no difference for who you are. When you wish upon a star, your dreams come true.
And you know, I think it is that if you're picturing and focusing on what can be, and you mentioned before, oh no, it wasn't you that mentioned today, someone mentioned a vision board today.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you're focusing on those amazing things in your life, when you look upon a star, dreams come true, or whatever, you have to be focusing on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes those dreams are nightmares along the way, but you have to keep focused on where you want to go. And just like climbing a mountain. You know, you want to look at your summit of success, and it's oftentimes there's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back in mountain climbing, and same in life. But you focus on where you want to go, not where you've been.
So we're going to have When You Wish Upon a Star, and you guys aren't going to hear that, but here we go. I do love that song.
It is a nice song, isn't it?
You know, let's go to Walt Disney. How amazing was Walt Disney? Do you guys like Walt Disney?
Well, he was amazing because he got turned down from... I mean, I remember hearing that song when I was a kid. But he was... Then later, when I was teaching leadership, he got turned down from every bank. No bank wanted to fund Disneyland. Everybody told him it wouldn't work. And he made it work. And he created changed the paradigm of creating a happy place. And I've subsequently lectured at Disney University, where they teach people about, you know, customer service and things like that. And it's really looking at possibilities. And I never really made that connection between when I was a kid listening to that song and the bigger, wider world of leadership management.
And yeah, it's
And one of the sayings from Disney, it's not the magic that makes it work, it's the work that makes it magic. Because it's called the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
But it's not, there's no magic, there's no secrets. It's just putting in the work.
Yeah.
We create the magic.
So just before we close too, when we come back, because we've got to close up in a minute, but I wanted to talk about, I just want to check my notes here. I do want to talk about some of the things of trekking, but what drives you, or maybe we'll talk to these guys, what drives you to spend hours alone writing? We'll talk to these guys about that. What drives you to spend hours alone writing?
Sally from Seattle.
Sally from Seattle.
You know, I don't have children. I guess my books are my babies. Hopefully they're a legacy. And if I get and I get lots of emails from people about how the book has helped them.
Yep.
I also sometimes get emails from people saying, I was at your presentation, it changed my life. I'm going, ooh, I'm not in the business of changing lives. Only life I want to change is my own. Hopefully I can change people's thinking so they can change their life for the better. And that's what drives me. It's not...
Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking about that and how, simple things that you might say would make someone stop and think and go, well, she can do it, maybe I can do it.
That's exactly what I want people to think, because when the memoir came out with Random House, it's got the cover, I don't know if you can see it there, but you can show it.
Oh,
it's got the woman on the front cover, there's no head. And that to me symbolizes any woman on any journey. And it's available in the Manly Library. I know that for sure. Yeah, don't worry about buying a copy. Just go to the Manly Library.
And is it on your website too?
No, it's not. It's on Amazon. It's a different title on Amazon. It's called Hope is My Compass on Amazon. But what I say to people, I was just an ordinary person that had extraordinary stuff happen to me through no choice of my own. The only thing I could choose was looking backwards or forwards, being a victim of change or a victor from change. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. I truly believe that.
So we're going back on air now, and I'm with Catherine DeVrye. And Catherine, we've talked about so many things, but you've trekked the Andes, and I'm not going to say more. Tell me about that side of your trekking, and you talked about Mongolia.
Well,
become a lifesaver. You've talked about that, but the Andes?
we cycled over the Andes without a support vehicle a few years ago. I love travel because I believe that we're all the same everywhere in the world. We share the same hopes and the same dreams and the same fears. They might have different variations, but we all have our ups and downs, and we're all connected by the universal human spirit. So I've been to every continent on Earth. I've been to over 116 countries. And I'm writing a book called From Timbuktu to Kathmandu, which will that'll take a few years before that's finished, about courage and kindness around the world. And I just love adventure. I've been to Everest, beyond Everest Base Camp, trekked to there really is such a place as Timbuktu.
Yes,
and it isn't.
I have heard there is.
And it nearly is the end of the earth. I'm here to tell you. It's pretty rugged.
Did you take photos?
Oh yes, of course.
So I'm going to ask for a photo to see one at some stage, because we all use term. We say Timbuktu, but a lot of people don't know anything about Timbuktu.
I've been to like Syrian refugee camps in Serbia. I just love traveling, and I love meeting people from different countries and just learning that we really, I don't know, all this conflict in the world, but basically in our hearts, we're very much the same.
I've got one place you won't have been to. You won't have been down the salt mines of Poland, have you, Wieliczka?
No, I've been to Poland, but not the salt mines.
Well, I spent nearly a year in Poland. That's
Did
another
you?
story. But I worked down in the salt mines.
Worked in the salt mines?
Yeah, as a teacher to young children who were on film sets. So
wow,
that's another story.
You should be writing it down.
Sometime.
We all have stories.
We all have stories.
We all have stories.
But people don't think they do they?
And some people have very boring. Everybody says there's a story in you, but in some people's stories should stay in them because you're sitting hearing the same old broken record, the same story. Oh, woe is me! This is terrible. We've all got stories. We've all had ups and downs. But as I said earlier, it's the chapters we write for the future. We can't change our past, but it's the chapters we write for the future to autograph our own future and our own destiny.
Oh, well, Catherine DeVrye, I have had a perfect afternoon with you.
You're too kind.
And how do people find you?
Probably the best thing is on my website, which is www.greatmotivation.com or catherinedevrye.com, but nobody can spell Catherine DeVrye, so stick to greatmotivation.com. And there's demo videos on there. There's adventure videos of Everest Base Camp, wisdom of whale sharks, various things. And thanks very much for the opportunity to be in Northern Beaches Radio. And I'm so lucky to live on the Northern Beaches.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we all are. So thank you very much for the listeners today for joining us, Catherine DeVrye and myself on Aging Fearlessly. Until next time, cheerio. It's time to say cheerio to the wonderful Northern Beaches community. Join me next week for another episode of Aging Fearlessly. And now for a song written by Nick Howard, especially for the listeners. This is Karen Sander. Have a fantastic week. And remember, aging is inevitable. Growing old is a choice.
Exactly.
Ooh! I have had an absolute blast of a time.
We're still on?
Yep. Oh, we could dance. We won't dance. No. I hope you all enjoyed it
today. Just a number.
This has been so much fun, and join us another time.
Oh, I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I have no idea about any of it because I'm an old person, but I think young.
Don't forget books, and there's 8 of them. One more coming. What's the next one?
Lessons from Nature about resilience.
And some of them are photographic. Join us.